and it's terrific to have Fiona Simson here for our lunchtime online sessions and our first of 2025. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on whose land we meet today and pay my respects to owners of the lands around the country and to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge obviously that many of you are on different traditional lands right across the country today and acknowledge their traditional owners as well. It's terrific to be online. I'm Minister Julie Collins, the Minister for Ag, Fisheries and Forestry, and also Minister for Small Business. And this is the first Lunch with Leaders series for me, and I'm going to stay online for a little bit because of our terrific speaker who's going to get introduced to you shortly, Fiona Simson. And Fiona, of course, and I did work together when I was Shadow Minister back in the day. So it's terrific to have Fiona online today, and I'm looking forward to this series today about biosecurity, particularly. As the Minister, we've obviously put a lot of investment into biosecurity since coming into office, and I know that there's good work happening right across Northern Australia in terms of our biosecurity, and being the only continent free from that H5 virus has been particularly important to me as a Minister in driving that. So it's terrific to have you online today, Fiona, to talk about your experiences more broadly, but understanding, of course, the Northern Australia biosecurity strategy and focus is about the program and protecting our country and the challenges and reflections around that. So it's terrific to have you with us, Fiona.
Thanks so much, Minister. Thanks so much, Minister. It's fabulous to be here, and very exciting to be attending lunch with women right across Northern Australia. And lovely to have you here to introduce me. Thank you, Minister. It is, as you say, we worked together before. I have a lovely photo of you and I standing at the NFF conference, actually, with Anthony Albanese, and it's nice to see you back in the role again. And I know that industry particularly appreciates your passion. As you say, biosecurity is one of the biggest issues facing not just Northern Australia, but Australia in general, and it's one that certainly has occupied me a lot in my career, and I'll talk about it a little bit as I go along through my journey. So I guess for me today, I've been asked to reflect a little bit about leadership, a little bit about my journey, a little bit about how that has worked with the things that I've done and the things that I'm passionate about, and also, of course, the amazing agricultural industry that we have in Australia, and of course underpinned by biosecurity and great biosecurity, which is what we need to continue working on. I think there's a few key messages that I'm going to leave you with, and the plan for today is I would love this to be as informal as we possibly can make it, and to have a great conversation. Actually, I've already started the conversation with Jessica from CASA, who I met on the plane down to Canberra the other day, who very kindly helped me with my bag. I've had some recent foot surgery, and so I was a little bit disabled with my stick and my bag and the escalators and the whole thing. So I'm just going to say a big shout out to Jessica for helping a fellow traveller in need, and I was so excited to be meeting somebody face to face that I was going to be talking to online on Friday. So shout out to Jessica, and thank you so much for the help. So I'm going to leave you with, I hope, a few key lessons or messages, I think, about leadership particularly. But I also would love to have a conversation with you about what you see as some of your challenges and things that perhaps, you know, we can talk about and keep it reasonably informal. I think when people think about leadership, you know, they think about all different sorts of things. And right up front, I think, you know, for me, I had never planned to be a leader. It was something that happened because I got very involved and passionate in a community group. I come from a farm on the Liverpool Plains. The background behind me, I have to say, is a bit fake because it's not where I live anymore. It's the house on our farm where my husband and I lived, and our children, and now we're doing the whole succession planning thing, and we've moved off the farm. And that veranda behind me, which was the background for a lot of the chats that people saw on the drum and other programs during COVID, is actually now full of toys and scooters and bikes and animals and cats and dogs and everything else that a 2-year-old and 4-year-old has. So, but I wanted to put it up today because I think life is a journey. You never quite know where it's going to take you. You have to grasp it with both hands. And if you want to be a leader, the first thing you have to do, and even if you don't want to be a leader, even if you've never thought of being a leader like me, you have to think about the person you want to be and the person you want to become. And so when I was having a little think about leadership in preparation for today, I looked up and I thought, I'm just going to see what sort of a definition is there about a leader. And one of them was that someone who leads or commands a group, an organisation or a country. And that's certainly not me. That's certainly not what I wanted to be. I really associate much more with somebody, there's another one that says they guide, influence and inspire others towards a common goal. And that's, of course, all about shared vision, collaboration and common values. And so for me, when I started my career now, which has been the career that I chose back in 2008 when I first got involved, when I first put my hand up for the community group in the Liverpool Plains that was fighting coal mines, I had no thoughts of leadership at all. All I thought about was wanting to help, wanting to preserve the amazing agricultural landscape and water resources that we have in the Liverpool Plains, making sure that we could sustain agriculture indefinitely in the plains, making sure that we could continue to support my community. And so I put my hand up to help in the community group that was determined to go through the process, a proper process that was determined to insist on a proper process around the development that was proposed to happen in the plains, with no idea at all about where it would lead me, with no perception of where I wanted to go. I was living at home on the farm. I'd had a reasonably successful career already in terms of some business things that I was doing and training opportunities. And so it was the last thing that I thought that I would do would be to be the head of the National Farmers Federation, to be on television quite regularly, to be recognised at train stations in Sydney and Melbourne and Perth, and to be stopped and helped and all sorts of different things, which is actually now part of what I do. And I have to say, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but I do still pinch myself a little bit when people ask me to come and talk to them about my leadership journey, because for me, it's just been a regular thing. It's been something that I've just done. It's been something that I've been passionate about. And it's something that has now evolved into a wonderful career for me where post-NFF, I'm actually now able to be involved in organisations like the Climate Change Authority, the Nature Repair Committee for DQ in the government, supporting the making of really good policy, I think, in government, by making sure that the agricultural voice is in that room and adding my voice to the others in the room to make really good collaborative policy that will stand Australia in great stead and stand agriculture in great stead as we actually, continue to grow our industries. So I guess that's the first one. For me, it's about deciding, if you're thinking about leadership, first of all, think about what a leader is. Think about what a leader does. Think about what you would like to be if you're going to be a leader. And for me, this collaborative vision, this inspiring others to common goals, this value sharing is something that became part of what I did and then really became part of my leadership journey. I think there are so many leadership courses around these days that people think, you have to do a leadership course if you're going to be a leader. And in actual fact, I didn't do one until I was probably halfway through my career. I didn't have time. I was way too busy. And then, I was able to actually do quite a short one. But it's a lot of learning on the job. And again, you don't always have to plan to be a leader. You can just follow your passions, follow your values, and they will lead you to a place where you can make the most impact for yourself and the most impact for others and feel completely fulfilled. So for me, as I said, it all began back on the farm, putting up my hand for a community group, determined to, and not to fight, but to, when we did end up fighting, actually, we ended up having the longest blockade in Australia's history. But that wasn't our goal. Our goal was to preserve the agricultural lands of the Liverpool Plains, to preserve the families, to preserve the water, and to make sure that there was a proper process being followed in the approval of these coal mines, which wasn't to our thought being followed. It was that coal mines were being given primacy and agriculture was not considered. And so we went into it to try and change the process. As we went through our discussions and our meetings, and we went through what was the current process at the time, then we determined that it was all very well for us to be in this little group where us landholders were there and we all agreed with each other fiercely. We were all on the same page. We were all on the same, absolutely fiercely in agreement. But that wasn't going to change it for us. What we needed to do was to actually get out and tell other people about it, have other people who passionately believed in it as well. And above all else, look at policies that were actually affecting and impacting what was happening to us. And that's how I became interested in policy, and that's how I became interested in policy development. And we, looked around the group, said who could go, who was available, what are the organisations that we needed to be involved in to affect policy change. We sort of thought about political parties, but they hadn't been really very helpful in our neck of the woods. And so, and we'd changed politics colours in New South Wales, so it wasn't about one colour versus the other. It was all about people who could help us. And we decided that local government was very influential in those days. We decided that the New South Wales Farmers Association should be influential because we were all members. And so I put my hand up to go on local government. I put my hand up to go on New South Wales Farmers Association. And as they say, the rest is history. So that was the start. Never thought I'd end up here. Never thought I'd end up here nearly 20 years later, having had an amazing career and continuing career. But I continued to just follow my passions. I think the other thing about leadership is that people always think it's about you. And it's not. It's actually not about you at all. It's about everybody else. So it's about the people that you want to bring with you and the people who you're hoping to inspire. If you think about that, the saying that the definition that I talked about others, influencing others towards a common goal. Well, it's those sorts of people that you have to bring along with you. It's those sorts of people that you're hoping to inspire. And it's also about those that you surround yourselves with, because you can't do it on your own. So somebody said to me, and I think when I think about some of the things that I've done in particular that have showed leadership in my time at NFF, which is the time that I'm most known for, things like the 2030 roadmap stand out, which is where we really set a very ambitious goal for our industry. We determined that we did not want to be on the receiving end of whatever government, whatever colour told us we should be. We decided that we as an industry should actually chart our own path and show where we wanted to go. And it consisted of really setting some really quite ambitious goals, and it's still in place because it sets the ambitious goals and some targets for 2030. It's a roadmap that all governments have come on board with, all the state governments have come on board with, all the federal governments have come on board with, the industry has come on board with. And I'm not sure whether we're going to get to all the targets that we set ourselves, but I know that the way we did it was a way to bring people along. We first of all went around Australia and we talked. We had 26 or 28 meetings, I think it was, right across Australia, talking to people right across industry, talking to people in rural and regional communities about what agriculture meant to them and what they saw as the future. They were inspiring, those people, and they inspired us to then set some really strong targeted goals with metrics so that we could actually make sure we were delivering and chart our course. And so for me, if I'd just gone out and said, we want to be carbon neutral by 2050, or, we want biosecurity to be blah, blah, or I think we should be doing biodiversity repair or nature repair, people would have laughed in my face. And a lot of people say, why aren't you out there, Fiona? You should be out there. Well, no, I can't be out there. If I'm all on my own, it doesn't work. What I need to be is out there, flanked by everybody else behind me. I don't want to look behind and see nobody there, because then you won't get the outcomes. I wouldn't have got the outcomes that I got. And it's not about me. It's about those other people that we're bringing along. And how do you bring them along? How do you ensure individual growth? How do you make sure that it's about everybody else winning, not about you winning? And for me, that was one of my very, very important lessons, and something that I thought really hard to do after being left out there exposed sometimes when taking a strong position, but being out there on my own. The other thing is, it's those you surround yourself with. So you are not everything to everyone. You can't be everything to everyone. I have my strengths, and it's taken me a while. I'll talk a little bit more about the voice in your head in a minute. I have my strengths, but I certainly have my weaknesses. And so when you're looking around for people to work with, make sure you pick those people that are strong and good, and particularly that can enhance what you do. And they might be much, much better at doing things than you are, some of them. And you can surround yourself. I always had a little, if I had to go and do media, I'm sure the minister probably does this sort of thing as well, although she's probably very good at it now, much better than me. But always have a little sounding group for people, for your messages and things, to make sure that what you say or what you think you're going to say is actually going to come across how you think that it should. And so you have your little, you have your special groups of people, you have your supporters. I had some fantastic people behind me who would go out and talk to the people that needed to be talked to, that would take the knives in the back and the arrows and things and would stick up for me. And a lot of those people were blokes. It can't always be men, be women. It's about a whole team approach. And of course, diversity and inclusion is about diversity and inclusion, all sexes, all women, men, all kinds of life, all ages, all experiences, all skills. And if you really want to inspire people there, that you have to make sure that you do that and you take that into account all the time. So work out what sort of plan. I'm just going to reiterate as we go along so we don't forget. Work out what sort of a leader you want to be. Think about your values and your passion. It's not just about you, it's about everybody else, whether they're people that you're bringing along or people beside you. And another one is that you must be resilient, clear, and values focused. And you have to act on facts and not just rumour and innuendo. And I think that's a lesson that you can learn really quickly. And I certainly did in my job. People would come to me and tell me things, and I would go, oh my God, that's terrible. And then sometimes go out and write emails, or worse, go out publicly and say something without double checking my facts. And it was just diabolically bad. But also to take on fights and to stand for issues that you feel personally strongly about. I mean, I'm really excited that even though I have worked for 20 years for a federation where, you know, my members have been the ones that have actually made the decisions, in actual fact, I've always been able to stand behind the decisions that we've stood up for. I've never had to stand up for something that I didn't believe in. And I think you really must choose, if you're going to be a really effective, strong leader. For me, whether it's talking about, you know, getting some great outcomes in biosecurity, and we've been able to attain those to build that ring of steel through the last sort of term of government, or other things as well. I think it's making sure that you can be really true to what's to you, making true to your values and your passions that, you know, I talked about right at the beginning, and making sure that you can be really authentic in what you say and what you believe. Because if you're not authentic, that's when things start to unravel and people start to pick holes in you. It's very hard to stand up for something. It's very hard to defend something if it's actually not what you personally believe. So I think that's a really, really clear lesson, and it's something that you have to work very hard if you're going to be successful. Another one is you can't please all the people all the time. And somebody said to me when right at the beginning of my journey, you know, people will remember you in these roles if you do something or if you do nothing. And even though it could be something that they don't like, it's much better to be remembered for doing something than doing nothing. And so I set about, you know, setting things in place that I thought would make a difference. And particularly at NFF, once we had some clear air in terms of tenure and all the different things that we were doing, then things like the 2030 roadmap, things like the diversity in the agricultural leadership course, that scholarship that we now have, which runs every year. I think we're in our 7th or 8th year, and some wonderful women, particularly up here in the territory, go through it to establish some leadership skills and fill a gap. Things like the AgCareerStart, which we partner with the government to do, which is just a fabulous, fabulous gap year program, which takes kids out on farms, a lot from the city, and keeps them involved in agriculture. You know, whether it's about setting ambitious goals for our industry, for our people, for our climate, whatever it is. Not everybody agrees with all those things. But at the end of the day, if you can bring enough people along, if you can bring the main swell people along, you'll find that people actually will come along with you. but you won't please all the people all the time. You have to stand up for what you believe in. You have to follow your values. You have to follow your passions. You have to find a way where you can be authentic and people will then believe in you and allow you to keep coming along. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'm conscious that I'm getting to a time where I'll start to ease up soon and hopefully you'll have lots of questions and we can have some good discussions, is that the little voice inside your heads. And it's something that women and men have. You know, it's not just women. I think it's often women that talk about this little voice inside their head, the imposter syndrome voice. And it's not just women that have it, although I think in women sometimes it's particularly strong, and that's probably because of some of the breaks in our careers and also maybe some of the different traits of a female nature sometimes. But definitely for me, I've had that voice pretty much all my life. And it's the sort of voice that tells you you're not good enough to do something, that there's no way you could put your hand up for that because, you know, you don't have the right skills, or maybe you're not sure about your expertise. When I was asked whether I wanted to be the chair of NFF, I said no, because I didn't think I knew enough about trade, and I wasn't sure that I'd be interested in that. And then, you know, as people worked on me and as I came to see what the role really was, and as I saw how I could influence it and perhaps how I could make a difference through some of my skills, and knowing those things, then I came to understand it better and to understand what I could do in that role and to understand that it was a role for me. So I think it takes a long time to listen to those, to learn to not listen to those voices, to be able to say to yourself, in actual fact, that's not right. I know that's not right because I've got this and this and this and this. And to be able to then be strong enough to, despite that voice, which never ever goes away, to be able to actually withstand that voice and to do the things that you're passionate about, to do the things that you're going to find value in, and to do the things where you can really make a difference. And that leads me to the point where I say that you have to look for opportunities to extend what you do, or opportunities to align with what you do. And, you know, post NFF, most certainly the roles I have now, the Climate Change Authority, as I mentioned, the Nature Repair Committee, World Farmers Organisation, I chair some CRC boards and some other really interesting things, as chair ACR as well. All of those things that I do are learning experiences for me. They're things where I can make a difference, I feel, where I'm really proud of the input that I'm able to have. And whether we're talking about biosecurity, whether we're talking about, you know, climate change, whether we're talking about sustainability, all the things that I'm particularly passionate about, the people in our industry, the growth of our industry, the sustainability of our industry. In World Farmers, we're talking about, you know, unifying a whole voice of global farmers and global agricultural industry worldwide for these outcomes. We need to be able to continue to have these conversations. We absolutely need to be able to have input into these conversations. And whatever you do, the best thing about agriculture is that whatever you do, whether you're a legal nut, whether you're an environmental person, whether you're a policy wonk like me, whether you're a practical person and you go out and drive tractors or whatever it is, whether you're more interested in details and admin and stuff like that, whether you like growing stuff, whether you love animals, whatever it is, there is a place for you in agriculture. And you have to, the world will always have to have agriculture of some description, no matter how much it changes. You know, no matter how much we grow in petri dishes and test tubes or anything else, we will always all have to have agriculture and food, because we cannot live without it, us humans. And so for me, the most exciting thing is about being involved in agriculture is that it's an industry that welcomes everyone. And it's an industry where we must continue to evolve, where we're looking for the best and the brightest and the keenest and the newest in every facet, in every field, where it's great to have people that are already involved in agriculture staying in our industry. But it's even better to encourage new people in, people who don't know much about it at all, which is actually why I loved Minister Julie Collins when she was the Shadow Minister, and also working with Minister Murray Watt, because they were new people to our industry. They were hungry for knowledge and hungry to hear and hungry to learn, and then hungry to be able to help. And so they're the sorts of things that are so exciting and so important as we welcome new people into our industry towards this vision that we have about continuing to grow it. So Where I'm at right now, I'm very excited to be involved and engaged in the groups that I'm in. I'm very excited and able and passionate about being able to pick and choose a little bit about what I do. And I hope that as you go through your journeys too, that you're able to find things that can truly fulfill you as a person, because it's there that you do become a great leader. And it's when you're fulfilled and feeling like you're following your passions and your values that you're able to make the best contribution to the community, to your family, but also to yourself that you possibly can. So, and I might pull it up there for the moment and open up the questions.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Fiona. What a wonderful summary. I'm going to ask if there are any questions, but while people are getting their mics ready or putting something into the chat, I'm just going to read out a question that we got from someone who couldn't attend today. They're going to watch the video later, but they were very excited about having you on. So I'm going to read out their question first. So the question is, in relation to your work with agriculture, the food industry, and your role at Food Bank Australia, what positive government policies or industry actions do you feel can be made in the agriculture and food industry sectors to reduce the extraordinarily high rates of food insecurity that the country is currently facing?
Yeah.
And there's a second part to it, but I'll let you answer that first if you like.
We'll read out the whole bit and then maybe I'll approach the whole lot.
Right. And then the second part is also, what is the best approach to influence government spending on better regular monitoring of the food insecurity picture?
Yeah, well, it's sort of all the one thing, isn't it? And I haven't even touched on Food Bank. So Food Bank Australia is a role that I've taken on over the past 6 months. I've only been on the board for 6 months, but it's been incredibly exciting for me to be working with one of my old colleagues, who's Brianna Casey, the CEO again. But it's also, this is another branch of agriculture and what we do in agriculture, feeding the world and looking at how we can, first of all, continually produce that food, but make sure that people who haven't got enough can actually do it. And I was also very excited to be part of the global food banking network actually had a conference in Sydney this year. Their whole world conference, last year, was held in Sydney at the end, the last quarter of last year. And so I was able to be a panel speaker there and engage with some of the global food banking organisations. And we've now formed a partnership, an MOU. We've signed an MOU at World Farmers with Food Banking Network. Oh, there's a bit of an echo there. Sorry, that's gone again now. That's good. So we've actually formed a partnership, signed an MOU with Global Food Banking to get the best outcomes for farmers and for food insecurity worldwide. So what sort of policies are we lobbying for, and what sort of policies do I think that government should actually introduce to get better outcomes? Some of the things that we're talking to government right now about are having tax benefits for the donation of food and product from the farm. So most of the figures, when you look at food waste, so obviously food insecurity, food waste closely tied together. And when you look at some of the figures about food waste or product waste, actually doesn't include the figures on farms. And so you have to add all of that into that sum, as well as the sums of product that doesn't get picked up out of the fields, doesn't get picked up out of the paddocks. And it's not just an Australia problem, it's a global problem, because the farmers probably haven't got enough resources, because the infrastructure possibly is no good, because there's no processing facilities there that they can turn it into something else and keep a longer shelf life. And also because there's no taxation benefits for farmers to do so. So if you think about it, if I donated $1,000 to Food Bank or any charity for that matter, I'd be able to claim that off my tax. But if I donated $1,000 worth of bananas or carrots or meat or anything, milk, I'm not able to necessarily claim that off my tax. It's much harder and it's not nearly as clear. So first thing is, and this is something that food banks and farmers right across the world are lobbying for at the moment, and some countries have it and some countries don't, is the ability to claim tax benefits for product that is donated to a food charity such as Food Bank Australia. So that's the first one. The second one is, as I mentioned, sometimes it's very hard to get the resources to actually pick and pack some of that product. We're talking primarily about horticultural stuff with a short shelf life. But obviously fruit and veggies is incredibly important for people who are food insecure to get the right vitamins. And in Food Bank Australia, we have a real focus on not just giving people food, but we don't want to just give them, processed chips and stuff like that. We want to give them things that are good for them. And that's why we have school breakfast programs and stuff like that actually gives kids the right sorts of nutrients. And where mums who want to do the right things by their families can actually have confidence that they're feeding their kids the right things. So again, sometimes it's the mobilisation by governments and support by government to these organisations to actually have resources that can go out to the farms, where they can mobilise, whether it's people or whether it's processes. So some countries like Colombia, can you believe, are way more advanced than we are at this. And they actually have a series of little processing trucks that drive out to the farms, and they're dehydrators, they're mobile dehydrators, so they can feed this stuff into the trucks, and it's a dehydrator that then gives that product a longer shelf life. And also where they can mobilise a number of transport trucks, so they get the people to pick and pack, they get volunteers to pick and pack, and then they also get the volunteers then to load the trucks and take them off to processing. And again, making sure that all of that is tax deductible is really good. I think you have to have a very clear vision around food waste and a very clear vision about what government can do. And a lot of the way that government can help is sometimes just energising these policies, whether it's about taxation benefits, whether it's about helping with some of these things, such as food processors, mobile units, mobile refrigeration units, mobile dehydration units, looking at transport infrastructure. In ACR, we worked with farmers who were able to grow watermelons as a second crop to their monsoonal rice, but they had no way of getting those watermelons to market. So again, government stepping in, seeing where their gaps were, and then being able to actually put in place some of those policies that are going to make actually massive difference, a practical difference to helping feed food insecure people. I think supporting the government gives very little money all in all to some of our food rescue organisations. They are supported very much by some of the bigger companies, by the supermarkets, by the processors, and by people in general. The food bank warehouses right across Australia are staffed by volunteers nearly entirely. Our actually core team is very, very small. And so money is always helpful if government was able to actually incentivise, I think, and prioritise, getting fresh food out to people wherever they may live, and incentivise particularly the donations of food, and sometimes it's not always product that's at the end of its shelf life, it's not always product that's going to go to waste, it's product that we need to buy, because now there are over 3 million Australians, the Hunger Report shows, every year that are food insecure. So, and a really important question, lots and lots of different things that we could be doing, but I think for me, the nub of it is, government has a role, but everyone has a role, farmers have a role, and some of government's role is actually just to make it easier for farmers to actually be able to give some of that product that we have to the people who need it.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Fiona. That's a fabulous answer. We have a couple of questions. We've got one from Wendy online, but I'm going to ask Greg if he wants to ask his first.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not a lady of agriculture, but I never let that stop me.
It looks like you're a person. That's
right. Thank you. My name's Graham Mackay. I work with the Kimberley Pilbara Cattlemen's Association over in WA, and I suppose my question's really around raising the profile of the industry outside of the industry. A lot of the amazing stories you hear about, leaders and initiatives and all that. It all happens within the industry, like within our communication channels, and I'm not sure how much of that translates out to the broader community. And I'm just wondering, I know it's a complex topic, but keen to hear your thoughts about how you bridge that gap or how you close that gap about agriculture being just a part of Australia, whereas it's been quite disconnected and neglected and over over here in WA, but I believe in other states as well. Yeah.
It's a big one, Greg, but it's something that I have absolutely been really passionate about. And if I think about some of the initiatives that we put in place whilst I was at NFF, there was a thing called Telling Our Story, which is about enabling people to tell the story of agriculture. And one of those things actually culminated in National Ag Day. And that's where it's really encouraging people. It's in November every year, to actually go online, put up a story about what they're doing on their farm, and actually talk to other people about what they do. Because these days the world is our oyster. You're absolutely right. We get stuck in our own little chat rooms. We get stuck in our own little social media bubbles. We get stuck in our own little, rural newspaper leadership groups, and we get stuck in our own little chats. And we have to keep going out and telling the story of agriculture. And that's one of the reasons why I think everybody has to take responsibility for this. You have to have the conversations with people, and you have to buy into some of the things. Some of the things like National Ag Day, it was so incredibly hard to get people to actually come on board with some of that journey. And it's so exciting now to see it building. But it's still, there's a lot of people out there who don't know about it. And in actual fact, there's a great opportunity for everybody to at least once a year start talking to people about what they do. So I think it's up to people to actually, do some digging and change your conversations, change up your groups. Don't just stick in the same groups where everybody believes the same thing all the time. Get out of your comfort zone, and actually start scrolling around the internet and listening to some different podcasts and listening to some different people and having a go. But above all else, I think teaching some of your people in Kimberley, Pilbara probably, how to tell their story. And I think it's been quite successful where some of the groups have actually worked with some of their farmers and some of their industry people to help them tell their story on social media. And I know the cotton industry, for example, has done a huge amount of work with this in training up some of the young people about the way to, what you should put out on social media and what you shouldn't. Not that you should put too much of a lens on it, but just that you have to be aware that it will go anywhere and it could be interpreted anyhow. And you want to be trying to tell, real stories about what's happening out on the farms and out in the agriculture and encouraging people in that way. So I think, making the most of what's out there now, making the most of those networks, making the most of things like National Ag Day, making the most of some of the AgCareerStart's another one where we've been bringing young people in, and then they've been going, there's some literally hundreds of young people now that have been through that gap year program that are going out back to the cities, back to their city families, and just continuing to have the conversation. We shouldn't shy away from the conversation about, bringing people into our industry and opening the doors on our industry. We want to make sure that we're continuing to be successful and sustainable, and that's the only way we're going to do it. All hands to the wheel. You can't rely on one group or another to do it. You have to get involved yourself.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Wendy in the chat has said, thank you for your insights. How do you maintain your energy levels and being pulled in multiple directions by work demands?
That's the hardest one. I'm a really bad no person. And I still struggle with that. I tend to take on way more than I should, and I tend to say yes to way more than I should. And so for me, it is about a juggle, and it for the last 20 years, it has been about a bit of a juggle. And I am now prioritising me a little bit because, as I said, I've had to have some foot surgery and things, which is just my body breaking down, really. So I've had to prioritise that. I've had to prioritise staying at home. I've had to prioritise being on a knee scooter for 4 months. I've had to prioritise all of those things. But I think it is just recognising really that you're not the only one that can do stuff. Just as I said to Greg then, it's about everybody taking responsibility. I mean, people can't step back and say, Fiona, you're the only one that can do this. Fiona, you must do this. Fiona must do that. It's way too easy to believe that Fiona must do it. Fiona must do this. Fiona must do that. And even now, some of the things I really want to do, I have to prioritise what I can do. What I really, really want to do, I have to, I have to really think about, is this something I really, really want to do? Is this something where I can really, really add value? And then I do that. But I also keep energy from making sure that I keep my friends, my family, those sorts of links going very well too, and that I have time for myself. So even though I was on a knee scooter for 4 months, I was able to spend some time, doing things for me. And I think keeping those relationships close to you, keeping the things that are important close to you is super important as well, because they, at the end of the day, are the things that energize you. Have a think about what energizes you. Maybe it's reading a book. Maybe it's writing a blog. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's talking to your friends. This morning I had a coffee with my girlfriends, which I try to do every Friday when I'm home. And those sorts of things energize me. But work out what energizes you. It's different for everybody. Some people like quiet time. I'm a little bit of an introvert where I actually prefer to be just with me as opposed to going out and partying all the time. I like a party every now and again, but that certainly doesn't give me energy. Whereas for me, spending some quiet time for myself, just thinking and listening to things and writing a little bit gives me energy, and spending time with my friends gives me energy. So you can't be everything to everyone. You can't keep going like an Energizer bunny all the time. But more importantly, you're not the only one that can do stuff. So don't hesitate to delegate. Don't hesitate to, one of those wonderful people that you've surrounded yourselves with, delegate to them. They can do it. And they'll probably do it better than you.
Fiona, I love that. Next we have Chantel.
Thanks, Anne. Fiona, you spoke a little bit about the voice that we have inside of our head and how you can learn to tune in and out of that and when the right time to do that is. Do you have any tips on how we could learn that a little bit better?
Well, I'll tell you one of the funny things is, so if you start talking about, and sorry for all the blokes online, but if you start talking about gender, equity, and you should be, when you start talking about should you have quotas to have women in or not, or what, all these things. One of the things that women actually come back to me with all the time is that you shouldn't be selected just because you're women. And I actually don't think that either. I don't think that's true at all. What I think you should be selecting for is you should be selecting for skills and expertise. And sometimes you just have to have a look a bit harder to find, if you've got diversity and inclusion in your mind as well, then you just have to look a little bit harder until you find those people. But I think the way to dull that voice down, because I could have, and if you look around and you think of people in positions that some of those people will be fabulous in those positions, men and women, and some will be terrible. And the thing is, it's about recognizing that the way to dull that voice down is to start being true to it and talk back to it and say to it, now hang on a minute, you say I can't do that, but why couldn't I do that? If it's asking for communication and written skills and something else, I've got those. I can do those things. Here's when I've done it. This is what I've done it. This is what I've done. It says that I'm not very good at public speaking. Okay, well, I'm probably not very good at public speaking, but I can learn that skill. So it's just talking back to it and using the facts and things, but you have to almost have a conversation with it, Chantel, to say it's not a bad thing that you've got this little doubting thing in you, because it stops you being brash and loud and putting yourself forward for stuff that it's not appropriate for you. But you also have to know when to just say to it, okay, I've heard that, go away now and let me just have a go at doing this, because I'm comfortable that I've either got those things that I need or that I can have a go at doing those things and learning those things. And not everything comes naturally to people. Some of it is a learning environment, but just tough up to it, listen to it, go, yeah, I've heard you now. Now get back in the back there and this is why I think I can push back against it. And sometimes it's just being a little bit brave. And putting your hand up for something and if you're authentic about it, if it's something that's you're passionate about. I can see Bron Christensen's just put up, or put your hand up for an NFF diversity and leadership program. Exactly. Find yourself a mentor, somebody who you can really talk to about what you are good at, what you really like to, somebody who you can trust, who can really talk to you about what you want to do and what you think you want to do. You're not just going to suddenly sit down and list 5 values and 5 passions. It's going to come to you over time. But keep working at it, because it is worth it. And it helps you be you don't want to be listening to that voice.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. That's Stephen.
Hello, Fiona. Thank you very
Hey,
much for
Stephen.
sharing. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. And I just wonder, as you said, it's not possible to please everyone during the whole process. I just wonder how you handle the pressure, especially those from the people that you cannot really please while doing your job.
Yes. There's been many of those, Stephen, I have to say. And I think sometimes it's just recognizing that you can agree to disagree, that it doesn't have to be a personal thing. Some people, the hardest ones are when people make it a personal attack. And then my strategy with that is that I go high. If they go low, I go high. I do a Hillary Clinton, and I go high. If they go low, I go high, and that works quite well for me. So I just refuse to engage in, personal attacks. I refuse to engage. In my whole career, I've never played. They like using an analogy of football. Agricultural advocacy, they say, is like a game of football. You've got to go out on the field. This is the boys' version. You've got to go out on the field. You've got to have a bit of biff. You've got to get a bit of blood, and then you can all go back into the change room together. Well, the change room bit's really good. I wasn't so much into the biffing and blooding. I was more about the working behind the scenes thing. But so, first of all, I think you never stoop to, if they don't agree with you, have a discussion with them, have a fulsome discussion. But more importantly, Stephen, I think, try and get them onto the same page to start with by making sure, and in some of the discussions and debates we've had in NFF over the time where we never thought we would be able to get to the positions we got to, and like, for example, setting some of the goals in our 2030 roadmap, you have to make sure that everybody is on the same page when you start the discussion. So, sometimes you can assume knowledge, that people have a level of knowledge about sustainability that you do, or a level of knowledge that they think they think they know what you're talking about when you're talking about climate change or agriculture or animal welfare or grass, whatever it is you're talking about. You think that people have a level of knowledge about it, and people might have a level of knowledge about it, but it might be a level of knowledge that's not actually factual, might be a level of knowledge that they've got from talking to their friends or reading it on Facebook, or reading a newspaper, because then, newspapers are not always factual anymore. So make sure that you actually start your conversation basing it on a level where everybody is on the same level of knowledge, and then build your knowledge up from there. And that's a way of helping make sure that people actually are going to, you're going to have less and less of those people that you don't agree with all the time. Sometimes you're just going to have to agree to disagree, and particularly with things like some of the political discussions that go along at the moment where it's really ideological. And of course, as a democracy, it's great that we can have these debates, but just keep trying, Stephen, to lift it up to the factual level. And at the end of the day, if they have a different view to you, then you just have to live with that and agree to disagree and walk away. Even though, that of course they reserve the right to try and influence you. But as a leader, hopefully you're doing a better job of influencing them to come away to your way of thinking instead. Resilience, I spoke about resilience earlier. You develop a very thick skin, and you have to develop a very thick skin. That doesn't mean that you should just sit there and let people abuse you. I never take personal attack. And also, I assert where I need to. I've asserted my authority as chair in meetings, and I've really braved up and done things in meetings to make sure that I maintained my authority. But you have to develop a bit of a thick skin if you're going to go out there, and make sure that you've brought as many people as you can along with you. Make sure that you've got people surrounding you that support you. All those things I spoke about earlier will lessen the friction that you get when you do come up against people that you disagree with.
Thank you very much. You mentioned a few skills to help develop a thicker skin, like you bring the people who can support you and are with you. Is there any other tips, especially in the personal mental strength building?
I think make sure you keep your brain space, Stephen, to make sure that you can have that personal space where the person before asked me about energizing. You have to make sure you're really comfortable in the decisions you make. You have to make sure that you are really having the time to remove yourself from some of those difficult situations as well. I would say very much make sure that you are surrounding yourselves with people who don't just agree with you, but who support you and help make sure that you're making the right decisions. And above all else, make sure that you're basing those decisions on fact. And then I think then it's a matter of trying to separate the issue from the person. So, don't let it ever disintegrate into a personal conversation where you sort of it's a blaming conversation. And this is, again, another skill that you learn where you don't talk about you did this and you did that and you should do that and you should do that. It's more about, okay, so we're talking about climate change. The scientists, you believe in science, you believe in scientists, you follow science all the time. The scientists say this and this and this. Yes, there's some scientific disagreement about this and this and this, but we're going here and here and here. So just keep it about the issue, keep it about go high, don't go low, and never disintegrate into personal attack. You're better off walking away from somebody who's really rude. The worst ones are the internet trolls. It's very hard to walk away from them. You just have to turn them off.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Stephen. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And now we have Jessica, who you gave a shout out to earlier in the call.
Jessica, where are you, my helper?
I'm here, and it was my pleasure. Thank you. I do have a question. I believe people are still very afraid to make mistakes. Do you have any tips, or do you have any guidance for leaders, particularly young leaders, when they make mistakes, or how do they recover from their mistakes?
Yeah, sometimes it feels like you're going to have that thing hanging around your neck like an albatross forever, doesn't it? And you know what? The tips I would have is just put it in perspective and chalk it up to experience, and don't be afraid to apologise, and don't be afraid to admit you've made a mistake. And then give yourself a platform to move on from there, because nobody is perfect. Just as you can't please all the people all the time, you're going to make mistakes. You certainly will, but own it. Own the mistake and be generous in terms of actually then doing your best to make up for that mistake. And that can be like a silly mistake. So, for example, one of the lessons I learned very early on was about if you're writing cranky emails. So emails can be very nasty sometimes, because you can get these emails from people who might say all sorts of things to you, and then you might want to say all sorts of things back to them. And then the thing is now, never put their name in the to box in case you actually inadvertently push the send button, because I have definitely done that in the past, where I called a man all sorts of names, and then he got that email. I nearly died. But I had to own it and say, look, I'm so sorry. I rang him and said, look, I am so sorry. I've sent you this email, which was totally uncalled for and totally unprofessional. And I should never, I actually didn't mean to send it, but I should never have written it even. And so we had a great conversation, actually. He laughed and he said, I'm sure that, that happens all the time. Don't worry about it. But so you have to own up for it. You can't, if I hadn't done that, I would never have been game to see this person again. I would never have been game to even, I would have gone to the other side of the room rather than actually engage with him. And he was someone that I needed to engage with. So, and that was just a silly mistake. But sometimes you can make mistakes. I talked earlier about not always believing everything you're told. Sometimes you can make factual mistakes, which are much harder to walk back from. But you have to walk back from them. You have to own them. So all I would say is that as soon as first of all, make the effort to try and make sure you make it, as few as possible. But fact check everything. Use your knowledge crowd around you and everything, your brain's trust. But also then when you do make a mistake, which is inevitable, everybody does, we're all humans, own it, hold it, learn from it, don't do it again. So now I never put the to person in the email if I'm writing any sort of an important email. I never do that. I use emails much less to do the important stuff anyway. I tend to have the conversations now, and then go forward. Don't think of it as, just think, okay, damn, that happened. We'll put that over here and we'll move on. We'll learn and move on, and I won't do that again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Fiona. We don't have any more questions, so I'm going to ask my question now. I'm lucky enough to get the chance. How have you managed in the past when you are dealing, because you talked a lot about in making sure that your information is factual, but we do live in a world where there's a lot of information that's incorrect out there that people tend to then use to support their arguments. How do you manage in that space, and what skills or approaches have you used in the past when you're faced with that situation?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about, issues now that are important and urgent, and there are so many issues that we talk about in our communities at the moment that are important and urgent. The Minister talked about biosecurity, important and urgent. Climate change, important and urgent. Sustainability, important and urgent. People, important and urgent. All of these things are important and urgent. It's really, really super important that we get the right information if we're making big decisions and having really major discussions as a community about some of these things. I encourage people to get off social media, to be quite honest, because following people to get these days, back in the day when all the investigative journalists used to do their work and they used to bring all the information together and then they'd do stuff and they'd put things out there. Well, that was all, very factual. These days, it's really hard to trust a lot of the things that you read in a lot of our newspapers and a lot of things on social media. And if you are reading something on social media and you think, oh my God, just go back and have a look. Have a look when it was published. Have a look at who published it. Have a look at if it's an article, whether it was peer reviewed or not. Have a look at the train and the information that goes alongside that, because quite often things are doing the rounds again and again and again. And can I say these days with AI, it's even more difficult, because now we're going to be seeing things that are totally fabricated. We're going to be shown people saying things that's total fabrication. So for me, Anne, it's about fact checking. So if I'm reading a report, who's paid for the report to be written? Who's authored the report? What's the organisation? Has it been peer reviewed? They're the 4 things that I start looking at when I'm looking at particularly at reading reports about different issues. I look for independent bodies. So I would say this, I'm on the Climate Change Authority. So the Climate Change Authority is an independent body. We're an independent group of people that are there to put out independent information about climate change. So I would say you can nearly always trust stuff that the Climate Change Authority puts out, rather than some of the things that other bodies necessarily that might be one way or the other are going out. If you are going to listen to think tanks and things, just go back and have a look at where they get their money from, because some of them are influenced by one side of politics or another. And that doesn't mean that you should disregard them. It just means that you need to bear that in mind when you're actually reading what they say, and then balance that. And if you are going to read newspapers, it's a trick that I do with my mother, then make sure she reads both the Herald and the Australian, or make sure she listens to the ABC and Sky News, so that you get this nice balanced sort of diet of news that's not necessarily one way or the other. And then you can often then pick your way through what's fact and what's fiction. But I think those first questions that if you read anything, who authored it, where are they from, who paid for it, and has it been peer reviewed? They're the things that you should check right at the very beginning of anything that you're reading, that will give you a better steer on whether it's true or whether it's not.
Well, thank you so much, Fiona. I note the time, so it's time to wrap up. What an amazing session. I'm so grateful for you giving up your time to come and speak with us today. Really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone else online also feels the same way. For those of you that don't need to race off immediately, we do have a survey there in the chat that the Shona has just put up for us. If you do have a couple of minutes just to fill that out for us, it's only about 5 questions, but it does help us with future presentations and to make sure that we're meeting the needs of you as the audience. So please, if you do have a moment just to fill that out, I'd be very grateful. And I'm just going to say thanks again to everyone for coming along. Thank you so much, Fiona, for giving us your time and your amazing wisdom and insights. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone at the next session next month.
Thanks so much, Anne, for having me. Thanks, everyone, for the great conversations. Absolutely loved it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.